Picture this. It's roughly 3000 BC. You live in a small farming village. Your neighbor needs 3 baskets of barley to get through the week. You have barley. He doesn't. So you hand it over. Now here's the question nobody ever asks in school: what happened next? Did he pay you in coins? Did he hand you a shiny gold piece and say thanks, we're square? No. Because coins didn't exist yet. Money, as you understand it, was centuries away from being invented. So what actually happened? He owed you. That's it. That's the whole transaction. No currency changed hands because there was no currency to change hands. What existed instead was a debt, a memory, a promise. I'll give you back 3 baskets after the next harvest. And somehow, that flimsy, invisible, completely unenforceable promise held entire economies together for thousands of years before anyone thought to mint a coin. This is the story of how debt came before money. Not currency. Not cash. Not credit cards. Debt. The actual concept of you owe me existed for thousands of years before humans ever invented a physical object to represent it. And once you understand that, something clicks into place that most people go their entire lives never realizing. Money wasn't invented to make shopping easier. Money was invented to solve a debt problem. And that distinction changes literally everything about how you think about cash sitting in your wallet right now. Let's start with the myth. Because there's a story about the origin of money that gets repeated constantly, in textbooks, in documentaries, in casual conversation, and it is, according to actual historians and anthropologists who study this stuff for a living, almost entirely made up. The story goes like this. Once upon a time, humans bartered. You had chickens, I had shoes, we traded chickens for shoes. But bartering was inconvenient because what if I didn't want your chickens? What if I wanted, say, a goat instead? This is called the double coincidence of wants, and the story says it was such a massive headache that humans eventually invented money to fix it. Coins showed up, bartering disappeared, problem solved. Everyone claps. Here's the issue. Anthropologists have spent decades looking for a society that actually worked this way. A pure barter economy, where strangers walked around trading goods directly with no credit, no debt, no IOUs involved. And they have found, functionally, none. Not one confirmed example, anywhere on Earth, at any point in recorded history, of a society that ran primarily on stranger-to-stranger barter before inventing money. That's not a small gap in the story. That's the entire foundation of the story missing. So if it wasn't barter, what was actually happening in these ancient villages before coins existed? The answer, and this is where it gets genuinely fascinating, is that everyone just kept track. Mentally. Socially. Communally. You gave your neighbor barley, and everyone in the village simply knew he owed you. No ledger needed at first. No currency needed. Just memory, reputation, and social pressure doing the heavy lifting that we now assign to a piece of plastic in your back pocket. This system is what anthropologists call a gift and obligation economy, and it ran on something far more powerful than coins ever could. It ran on trust. If you helped your neighbor owed you. Not in a formal, contractual, sign here way. In a everyone in this village of 80 people knows exactly who's generous and who's a freeloader kind of way. And that mattered enormously, because reputation was survival. If you were the guy who never paid people back, who took barley and conveniently forgot about it every single time, word got around. Fast. And suddenly nobody would help you when your roof caved in or your crops failed. Your credit score, thousands of years before the word credit existed, was your entire social standing. Which means, and sit with this for a second, humans invented the credit system before they invented money to represent it. Now let's go somewhere specific, because this isn't just theory. This is written down. Literally. Around 3000 BC in ancient Mesopotamia, in the region we now call Iraq, scribes working in temples and palaces started keeping records on clay tablets. And what were they recording? Not trades. Not barter. Debts. Specifically, agricultural debts. Farmer A owes the temple this many bushels of grain, to be repaid after the next harvest, with interest. Interest. In 3000 BC. Before coins existed anywhere in the region. These clay tablets are, according to many economic historians, the earliest form of accounting in human history. And they weren't recording purchases. They were recording obligations. Who owed what, to whom, by when, and how much extra they'd owe if they were late. The temple economy of Mesopotamia ran almost entirely on credit, tracked meticulously by scribes, centuries before anyone in the region minted a single coin. Here's where it gets even stranger. Some of these debts weren't even measured in a fixed universal currency. They were measured in units like silver, but silver rarely actually changed hands. It functioned as an accounting unit, a way to compare the value of grain to livestock to labor on paper, without any silver physically moving from person to person. It was money as an idea, existing purely to make debt easier to calculate, long before money existed as a thing you could hold. Let that sink in. The concept of money, as a unit of account, showed up before money, as a physical object, did. We invented the math before we invented the coins. So why, if this system of trust and memory in clay tablets was working, did anyone bother inventing actual physical currency at all? The answer is scale. And strangers. A village of 80 people, everyone knows everyone. Reputation works because gossip travels fast in a small group. But civilizations grew. Trade routes stretched across hundreds of miles. Suddenly you're not trading with your neighbor whose entire life history you know. You're trading with a merchant from 3 cities over who you've never met and will probably never see again. And here's the problem with debt in that situation. Debt requires trust. And trust requires either a long relationship or a reliable way to verify someone's word. When you're dealing with strangers, across distances, with no shared community watching to enforce social consequences, I promise I'll pay you back stops working. Because what happens if he just leaves? What happens if you never see him again and he owes you and there's no village gossip network to shame him into paying? This is the actual double coincidence problem. Not I have chickens and you don't want chickens. The real problem was trust breaking down at scale. Debt worked beautifully in small trusting communities and completely fell apart the moment you tried to stretch it across large distances with strangers. So civilizations needed something that could substitute for trust. Something physical, portable, and universally recognized, so that a merchant 3 cities away didn't need to trust your word. He just needed to trust the object in your hand. That object needed to be scarce, so people couldn't just make more of it whenever they felt like it. It needed to be durable, so it didn't rot or break on a long journey. And it needed to be widely recognized as valuable, so nobody had to argue about what it was actually worth. Precious metals fit almost perfectly. Gold and silver were rare, they didn't decay, and they'd already been valued as jewelry and ceremonial objects for a very long time. So gradually, across different civilizations, independently, people started using measured amounts of metal as physical stand-ins for debt and trust. And here's the part that should genuinely reframe how you think about money forever. Coins were not invented to replace barter. Coins were invented to replace trust. They were a technology for extending the debt system to people who didn't know each other and would never see each other again. Money didn't solve the "what if I don't want your chickens" problem. Money solved the "what if you disappear and never pay me back" problem. The very first coins that historians can confidently date show up around 600 BC, in the kingdom of Lydia, in what's now western Turkey. Small lumps of electrum, a natural gold-silver alloy, stamped with an official seal to guarantee their weight and purity. That stamp was crucial. It meant a merchant didn't need to personally verify the quality of the metal himself. The king's seal did the trust work for him. Which means even the very first coins were, at their core, still about trust and debt. They just outsourced the trust to a government stamp instead of a village's collective memory. Now here's where the story gets a little uncomfortable, because if debt came first, and money was just a tool built to formalize and extend debt, then debt isn't some modern financial invention we should be scared of. Debt is, functionally, older than money itself. It's baked into the operating system of human cooperation. And ancient societies clearly understood how dangerous unchecked debt could become, because some of the oldest legal codes in human history are, essentially, debt regulation. The Code of Hammurabi, written around 1750 BC in Babylon, contains detailed rules about interest rates, loan terms, and what happens when someone can't repay, including provisions that limited how long someone could be enslaved for defaulting on a debt. Ancient Babylon had debt relief laws. Kings periodically declared what were called clean slate proclamations, wiping out certain debts entirely, specifically because rulers understood that unchecked debt accumulation could destabilize an entire society. Which means, and this is genuinely wild to think about, the very first economic crisis humans ever had to legislate around wasn't a currency crisis. It was a debt crisis. Before money had even fully taken over daily life. So let's bring this all the way back to you, sitting there, holding a piece of plastic in your wallet that you call a credit card. That card is not a modern invention conceptually. It is, in a very real sense, the oldest financial technology humans have ever used, wrapped in shiny new packaging. It's a promise. It's you telling a merchant, I don't have the actual value to give you right now, but I promise I will. Which is exactly, structurally, what your ancient ancestor was doing when they told their neighbor, I'll pay you back after the harvest. The only thing that's changed in 5,000 years is who's doing the trusting. It used to be your entire village, watching, remembering, gossiping, enforcing. Now it's a bank, a credit score algorithm, and a very large financial institution that has replaced your neighbors as the entity deciding whether your promise is worth anything. Cash, physical currency, coins, all of that came second. It was the patch. The workaround. The clever hack humans invented specifically because debt, on its own, stopped working once civilization got too big and too full of strangers for memory and reputation alone to hold everything together. So next time someone tells you money was invented so cavemen could stop awkwardly trading chickens for shoes, you now know the actual story. There was no golden age of barter. There was only ever debt, obligation, and trust, going back as far as we can find written records, and probably much further than that. Money didn't invent the idea of owing someone something. Debt invented money. And every single time you tap a card, swipe a phone, or promise to pay you back later, you're not doing anything new. You're doing the oldest trick in the human economic playbook. You're just doing it with better technology and a significantly worse memory of where it all actually started.